Okay.
We are set.
Okay, great. Although actually caught me a minute off guard because I need to pull up my remote. I still need to do the remote introduction, right?
Yeah, although we don't have any attendees at the moment, but for the recording.
Becky, you haven't memorized that yet?
I probably almost have, but I would not want to risk it. So let me just go ahead and say it so we can officially get started.
You've done it so confidently in the past. I just assumed it was all memorized.
Yeah, I practice before the mirror. Okay, the time is 7:01. And seeing as a quorum of committee members is in attendance, this public hearing is being called to order. Welcome everybody to the February 25th, 2025 public hearing of the Amherst Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by the state legislature on July 16th of 2022, this meeting is being conducted virtually using the Zoom platform, and it is being recorded and minutes are being taken as usual. And we will now just do an attendance. I'll just call on you to make sure we can hear everyone, though I think we did confirm we can do that. But Zoe?
I'm here.
Nat?
I'm here.
Suzanne?
Here.
Andrew?
Here.
Great. Okay, can hear everybody. Terrific. And so do we still don't have anybody here?
There's one attendee now.
Okay. So the plan tonight, just to refresh everybody's recollection or tell you for the first time, is that we will approve the minutes from our last meeting and then go into public comment for anybody who wants to make presentations about their proposals. And then we'll go into our, and that's the public comment section, and then we'll go into our deliberations about, and make our decisions about the grants. I had it planned, as we have, I think, for the last, ever since I've been doing this, to limit people to about 3 minutes for their presentations, not including questions that we might have for the grantees, the applicants, and we'll move along. And so it looks like, why don't we go first into the minutes from last? Did everybody get a chance to look through those?
Yep.
I thought they were, I remembered what a quick meeting it was, and I thought it was perfectly documented. I didn't have any changes to make. Did anybody else have any?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody want to move to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Great. Second?
Second. Yep.
All in favor? And we can just raise our hands. Perfect. All right. So those are done. And okay, well, since I see that Lev is our only attendee at present, so I think at this point what we should do is invite her if she wants to come and present, and then if anybody else gets here, then we'll ask them in also to present, and if not, then we'll just move directly into our deliberations and our conversation. All right. Oh, looks like Nate's joining us as well.
But Becky, there's no need for anyone to present, right? This is just if anyone wants to.
Correct. That's only if they want to. Yes. Thank you for clarifying. There's no requirement to present. It's only if people, sometimes want to just give us a little bit more information. And I'll say for Lev's benefit that I'm confident, especially based on having now read the questions that everybody asked of the applicants, that everybody read the applications really carefully and is really clear on what they are. But we're happy to hear additional information, or if there are points that that you want to emphasize, to hear those. But there's no requirement to do any presenting. So Lev, since you're still the only one, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to come in, feel free. If you want to just, okay. So we'll invite you in and go from there.
Great. Okay, no video. That's fine.
Can we put? No, we can hear you, but would love to see you too.
Oh, I can promote you to a panelist, and then
yeah, if you can do that, Walker, that would be great. That's a great. If people don't mind,
you'll disappear for a sec. Yeah,
sure.
There we go.
Great. Hey, how are you?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much to the committee members for your participation in this process, planning and setting priorities. I think that tonight your job gets a lot harder, actually assigning dollars to several amazing and worthwhile projects and saying no to other really important work. And at the Amherst Survival Center, we are having really hard conversations too, and making really similarly tough decisions. At the last meeting, I showed you this like dramatic graph of the number of Amherst residents relying on the center's food pantry each month, just going up and up. And I told you a couple of stories. One was about this woman who had never needed a food pantry and now out of work with a really serious illness. She was terrified about how she was going to make it. And I shared the story of this young dad who equated the cart full of free groceries with finding rent just a few days after it was due. Today, though, a volunteer of ours pulled me aside and thanked us for sending out an action alert last week that was urging people to call Congress to protect SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. And what she said really struck me. She said, "You realize it will be me here every day for food if they take that away." I listened and I assured her, of course, that we would be here. But she said, "But you realize there are a lot of me's, right? There are a lot of people in my situation. And look, this place is already packed." And she's right. Need is already rising and unfortunately going to get much worse. So we're having hard conversations about how to stretch every resource and plan for contingencies and share what we have between people to make sure we can say yes when someone comes for the first time. So in this cycle, the Amherst Survival Center is requesting exactly $20.80 per year in CDBG funds for each of the 4,000 low and moderate income food insecure Amherst residents that we will serve. And this includes offering each of those 4,000 people 2 full weeks of groceries each month, on site via curbside pickup or via home delivery. This is exactly the same cost per resident as the most recent award. It doesn't even account for inflation or rising costs of food. And I recognize that that total amount, $20.80 times 4,000 people, is $83,200. That's roughly 40% of the total available funds, a really significant portion. But I really want to urge the committee to consider both the depth of the service being provided and the vast scale of this program, serving 4,000 food insecure Amherst residents, and to please fund this project in full. Because this year, unfortunately, partial funding would in fact be a cut in costs for each of those people being served. And I really fear that now is not the time that we can afford to be pulling back. So I really thank the committee for your hard work. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the proposal. I just kind of wanted to talk about that scale more so than the details of the project.
Thank you. And that's helpful to know exactly where the dollar amount
Yeah.
request came from.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Lev? Well, thank you. Thank you for all the work you do, for your application, for recognizing the hard task ahead of us. And as you know, you're welcome to stay and listen. If we have any other questions, we'll bring you on in.
That's good. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So I have to just, I guess, obviously the meeting notice went out because Lev is here and she knows, but it's so strange that nobody else is here because usually everybody is here. So I'm just surprised by that. Hopefully we got all of our questions answered by the responses that came in, or enough to go forward. I had a couple of thoughts about the social service activities and sort of a bigger picture thoughts about those. But I think maybe what I'm going to suggest we do is first do the non-social service list, and then we can move into what usually takes more time, which is the social service list, if everyone's good with that. And so going into the non-social service activities, as I'm sure we all know, right, we've got 3 different activities. The total that can be allotted to the 3 is $552,000. And we can actually pick up to 3 non-social service organizations in our selections. Thank you, Walker, for putting together the rankings. That's helpful to see. So I guess, let's just get the discussion started. If anybody wants to offer their thoughts on, having if you have a strong opinion, all 3.
Oh, so one question, I didn't remember that from before. The limit of 3, is that because we have 3 proposals, or is there actually a limit of 3 no matter how many proposals we have?
There's a limit of 3 no matter how many proposals.
Oh, okay.
Correct, Walker, is that right? I have that
Yeah.
written down, but I'm not sure where I got that
Yeah,
from,
that's
but-
set by the state. You are
Okay.
allowed no more than 3.
Okay. And Lev is still in as a panelist, I think. I don't know if we
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to move her out. Right, so we can do 3 in total. So it's interesting. I guess I'll just start by saying, obviously, I think we probably all hear what an enormous issue housing is right now for people at all levels, right? From people who are entirely unhoused to people who are not able to stay in their housing. And so I was really glad to see that 2 of the projects were focused on dealing with housing, obviously in 2 kind of different ways. It's not, really different ways, but I was not familiar before this with the community, community. This is my problem where I don't
Land
know.
trust, yeah.
The land trust. I didn't print anything out this time. I tried to be forward thinking and be technological. Now I have no paper in front of me and I'm at a total loss. So the land trust, to me, that was a really interesting project. But maybe the most sort of risky of them, only that because it's not as kind of well established. But I was really interested in that and love the idea that people are donating their houses for that purpose. And it seems like such an incredible way for a community member to give back to the community. So I was excited about that particular program. I think for me, the one that was sort of least, as much as I'd like it to happen, but sort of least sort of feeling the urgency of the moment was the Kendrick Park updates. And adding the pedestrian access, I think that maybe would impact the most people because more people are walking around there, but it's sort of least impactful in terms of a person's life. So those are my thoughts on sort of generally. Does anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I had similar thoughts. I thought the Amherst Community Land Trust project seemed a little riskier, just because there's a lot of unknowns. But I liked the territory that it could be going into, and that if it does have an impact, then that could say to the community something like this could happen again in the future. So I like that it was the biggest ask, almost the entire budget at
Yeah.
525 out of the 552.5. So I think, we could easily pick all 3, but certainly, it's over $1 million between the 3 of them. So we'd have to make some real choices about funding. But I was similar that I thought the first 2 really spoke to the priorities that we have. So we could easily pick 3, but I would maybe be more inclined to look at the other 2, with the Amherst Community Land Trust and the VFW prep.
Walker, I think you had your hand raised first. Although people
Yeah,
can just
so
chat.
Nate and I were discussing the Amherst Community Land Trust application, and I guess it's fairly complicated to deal with land acquisition and actual construction through the CDBG grant, and that could be
Mhm.
pretty difficult to do. So we were going to propose potentially just funding the pre-development activities for that one, rather than trying to deal with the complications of doing the construction and acquisition portion of the project.
Okay, interesting. And do you have an amount that would be if we take out just, I don't.
I think we would have to
don't
ask
think-
them to break it out. I don't think they specified in their proposal
Okay,
how much it would be.
okay. All right, I'm not gonna be able to track who's raising hands first, so I feel like
Nate,
people,
Nate,
there's
enough
enough of us, few enough of us that you should just
Yes.
talk.
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, I had a similar thought. I really liked the idea of that development downtown, more housing and everything. But I had the exact same feeling on um, the land acquisition part of it, and partly in addition to whatever CDBG complications there are in terms of using the funding for that. The fact that there are zoning risks and how long will this take and everything else. And my reading of the application was that there's like $65,000 that they were asking for the kind of soft costs uh, for all of that. So in my mind, I thought, well, that's a decent amount to get this project going forward for them. And then if they get to the point of land acquisition, maybe they can find other funding for that. But at least get them through the the zoning and other hurdles that are really going to be, I expect, kind of complicated.
Yeah, Zoe?
Yes, I also share the same sentiments and same comments as you have all made. I was a little bit unsure, when I first read, although I love the idea. So I want to say thank you to Walker for clarifying. This makes my decision, way easier than before. So feel the same way. I think I reacted immediately, to the amount, the budget, that I that it wouldn't pretty much entirely take up our, a big portion of our non social service budget, with an unclear, it was uncertain, there was a lot of uncertainty involved for me. So this is really helping, kind of move the discussion, further.
And
Yeah, and
Andrew,
I'll
do you
just
have any-
echo.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just echo everybody. Yeah, I totally
Okay.
agree. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like we're maybe interested then in doing, Nat, thanks for breaking out that sort of the soft cost portion of it to the 65, and maybe we could think about doing 65 for them and maybe funding the VFW project in total, and then the remainder going to the Kendrick Park project.
That sounds
So
good to me.
Yeah, 265. So let me see what the remainder would be.
287.5.
Yep.
The one curveball, and I hate to introduce this before we get to discussion of the social services. But one of the social services, which in my mind I thought seems difficult to fund very much of, is the one for the BBAA. And I guess there's some restrictions also with CDBG money on using that for the kind of grants that they might have thought they were going to do.
Yeah.
But I recall last year we funded Valley CDC for their micro enterprise assistance program, $15,000. And it struck me that what BBAA is doing is very similar to that kind of micro enterprise assistance. And I wondered if it is, if it's difficult, at least it was for me, to think about funding them among the 5 social services. Is it possible to make room for them in the non-social services? And
I
if we
wondered about that too, and about the similarity of it to the Valley CDC, and I wondered whether we, I mean, exactly as you're saying, can we just determine that it's a non-social service project and put it in the different column?
Well, when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, we're making a recommendation to the town manager. And so town manager can always say that doesn't work. Or if the BBAA says, thanks, but no thanks, we wanted to do something different. And so if we can't get the 75,000 they're asking for to do exactly what they wanted to do, if they don't want 15,000 to do that kind of micro enterprise assistance, then the town manager can make that adjustment. But I thought I wanted to at least put it out there as a question / possibility.
Yeah, I got the impression that what they were proposing, although they titled it in a way made it sound similar to what the CDC was doing, that they'd actually, the money would be going towards individuals in the community for more personal things. It's not really business assistance. It's you're behind on rent or you have a medical debt you can't pay, that kind of thing. And I don't think that would fall under the micro enterprise umbrella. They're not really providing technical assistance to small businesses.
But I wonder if, in what Nat was saying, I think, if I understood correctly, is that, you know, in their grant, 15,000 of it was sort of for that more technical assistance and the trainings, and then the 65 was for direct grants, which my reading is that, and I really dove into the statute on this one, and but on section 570.208 of the statute of the code says that fees can be paid to the provider of services, but not to the individual for up to 3 months as direct cash assistance. So it can't go to a participant, but you could pay something for that person that they were needing. And I'm still not crystal clear that the things that they listed would qualify for that, but I think that one of the things I was going to ask them was if that was a restriction, is that something that they would be able to do, you know, pay to a medical provider, not to the person who couldn't pay their medical bill. But so if we took that 65 and sort of put it to the side, because we're not sure that the grant could cover it, and did that 15, that makes it much more of what the Valley CDC did, and sort of puts it more into that category of work.
Yeah, their 15 they had put for administrative stuff, but they might, yeah.
Right. But what was sort of within that, I think, was, and it looks like Nate's maybe can come in and offer some
Yeah, Nate, I think
more words on this, but
understands.
because they had training, I guess a lot of the training they do is sort of free because it's done by the volunteers and the people on the board. So the administration kind of covers that.
So the other kind of curveball associated with that, if we want to go forward with kind of that idea, and if we only can choose 3 proposals, then that means that we couldn't divide between the VFW and the Kendrick.
Right.
And so we would kind of put all the money into the Kendrick, and maybe I'm looking at this kind of simplistically, and maybe Nate or Walker can clarify, but I wonder for the town if it's kind of fungible. In other words, if they have these 2 projects or many projects they're doing, if they get CDBG money for one, that means they can use other money for another. So the fact that we're giving money to Kendrick Park doesn't necessarily mean that the VFW schedule is put off because they don't have money. That might be simplistic, but that limitation of only choosing 3 proposals would need to be considered too.
Right, or that we would decide if we were going to put the business, the BBAA, AABB, into this non-social service, would we do that and fund that over the community land trust? That would be the other option. I mean,
Right.
right,
So, yeah, this is Nate. If I could quickly,
Yeah.
with the non-social services, the soft costs with the VFW are more flexible in terms of if you have reduced funding. I think, the budget for Kendrick Park, if it's much reduced, then the town either is going to reduce what is done or, have to find other money, which I'm not sure how much, say like Chapter 90 or, public works funding there is to complete that budget. So, some of it would be what's a reasonable amount to fund out of that. I forget what the total amount was requested for Kendrick, but if you only give it 200,000 and it's a $480,000 budget, the town might not even be able to use the 250 very well, right? Or maybe it'd be some smaller amount. But we could try to make it work. In terms of the social services, I wouldn't reclassify the BBAA proposal. I think as written, it's not really fundable. Valley actually has staff that does micro enterprise assistance. They didn't apply this year because they've had trouble finding income eligible businesses or sole proprietors that would want to take their technical assistance. And so they have staff that do that. They have outreach. I wouldn't try to tease apart the proposal and say, oh, I think maybe 15,000 could be micro enterprise assistance. That's not how I read it. And so, any kind of cash assistance to an individual is not allowed. And so even if we did say like rental arrears, it's always to the landlord through an agency, not, we never make a check out to an individual. And so, I thought when I had spoken with them previously, I thought they were going to actually be funding for transportation, and then the proposal is a bit different. And so I would probably just go through the process and look at the rest of the proposals. And if you think you still want to fit, but I would, I don't know how it ranked, but I would consider discussing all the other proposals first and see if there's ways to make it work.
Do you think that what they are, if we are keeping it in the social service, and if we sort of recognize that the 65,000 that they're looking for isn't something that CDBG monies can be used for, do you think that the 15 that they're asking for is something that it can be used for?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I mean, I have questions about, verifying, income eligibility and meeting the national objective and certain things. It wasn't, sometimes a proposal has to take a year to mature, right? And get to a point where it can be funded, kind of like the Amherst mobile market. And so I feel like this proposal is in that position where, staff can help provide guidance after the fact, but I don't, if there's 9 proposals, social services, to me, this would be one that it's too questionable to then recommend over others that, clearly meet a national objective and a priority.
Okay. But that is assistance that you all can provide them if they wanted to come back with another
Right.
go around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Helpful. Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions on that?
Well, so I guess that raises what Nate said before about Kendrick Park, for example, raises the question in my mind. So for example, if we pick 65,000 for the land trust and 200,000 for the VFW site, which is 100% of what was asked for that would leave 287.5, I think, for Kendrick Park. So 287 out of 484 requested. I assume the town would be happy with that, or is it?
Yeah, I think, for instance, we would probably say eliminate the circular plaza area and just do the sidewalk and a crosswalk or two, as opposed to anything more elaborate. We would just do, basic pedestrian accessibility improvements for that amount. I'd have to look at the budget more closely, but I think we could make that work. It might just be a reduced project, in terms of what was being proposed. Like, we still could use it and get a sidewalk in and other pedestrian accessibility and safety measures in place.
Right, because I think the only way to counteract that would be to essentially fund it in total, which I think isn't what any one of us was thinking was the way to go, because that would require not funding the VFW project.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think that's a fine recommendation to make, and then it can be staff and the town manager discuss it more. But I think the way you describe the three projects and how you wanted to fund them is is good logic and a good recommendation, and so we can work with that.
Okay. So after hearing all that, does anybody have any other thoughts about changing, or any thoughts about changing what we had initially just discussed of doing the 65 to the Community Land Trust, 200 to the VFW, and then the remainder of 287 to Kendrick Park?
I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so I think we need to vote on that, Walker, right? And approve that officially, and then we'll move to the others. Okay. So does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. I have it in my notes. Is this wrong? Is it 552.5 is the total?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what I have down.
Okay, so of the 552.5, make the motion that 65,000 be allocated to the Community Land Trust, 200,000 to the VFW site, and 287,500 to the Kendrick Park project.
Second?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor, we'll do this out loud as we go. Zoe?
I do, in favor, yeah.
Okay, Suzanne?
Yes, I
Okay.
approve.
And I'm in favor as well, so great. All right, thanks, everybody. Okay. All right, so we will then move to the social service conversation. So we had 9 proposals this year, and it was great to see two proposals from 2 places we haven't had before, which was the Black Business Association and the Wildflower Alliance. And I really want to encourage people who haven't applied before to apply. But I think, taking what Nate was saying, I would hate to allocate money to an organization that ultimately is going to be rejected because it turns out to be asking to use money in a way that the CDBG monies can't be used. So I guess that's sort of where we're at with that. I don't know, does anybody have any other ways of interpreting that proposal, or any other thoughts about it?
No, I'm getting the feedback on, how the funds can be used is really helpful, being the answers to the questions. So that kind of helped kind of after the initial evaluation, and kind of putting that on hold possibly.
And thanks,
Okay.
Becky, for looking into the statute and everything.
It's a long one.
lawyer.
It's pouring into Lexus yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unlike sometimes at the federal level, we actually are trying to follow all the laws.
No, we're not being political. But I was laughing to myself because I was thinking, I'm so not a numbers person, so I'm always really appreciative, particularly like Suzanne and Nat, when you guys are calling out exactly what the amounts are. I can see you're doing the math either in your head or you've got a calculator there, as I'm just knowing you're doing it. And so it's like, well, the least I could do is read the statute. That's what I bring to the table. All right, so why don't we then also, while we're talking about kind of the new ones, talk about the Wildflower Alliance. And I'm happy to start with that, just to say I had asked a lot of questions about both their work and their past work, and was really sorry that they weren't able to respond to the questions that we had posed. So I'm left really with a lot of questions still about the organization itself and exactly how it would work. So I'm personally not quite yet comfortable having them on my list of organizations we would give money to, but I'm certainly happy to hear from other people and be persuaded otherwise if people have other information, thoughts on that.
Looking at the numbers, look like we ranked them fairly low, and so I'm certainly I was in that group ranking them low. So yeah, I think it's hard for me to see them in the top 5 that we would be able to recommend for funding.
Yeah,
Nate
Okay.
had some concerns.
sorry,
Nate
go
had
ahead,
some
Walker.
concerns about their, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Walker.
Okay, Nate and I had some concerns about their ability to really verify income and what exactly the program was and how it represented an expansion from what they were doing previously. So without that clarification, I think we wouldn't recommend them either.
Yeah. Okay. Suzanne, what were you
I
gonna say?
was just gonna say that it was unclear, just from the proposal, the impact in Amherst and to the number of residents in Amherst, and also how to verify income eligibility for what they want to do. So it sounds like a great concept, but I don't think it's all quite there yet for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had the lowest ratings, for this proposal as well. It left a lot of questions. The eligibility piece is big to me. This is what I do at work, constantly. So that's what I picked out as well. Not ready there, I'm not quite there yet. I want to see this a little bit further developed before we can, venture in this direction.
I see Andrew nodding in agreement, so we,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
welcome to chime in, or we can just.
No,
all
no,
agree.
no. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
But in agreement.
Okay, great. Okay, so that leaves us then with 7 other organizations to talk about. And so in terms of the ranking, and Andrew, I guess, just for your edification in terms of sort of how we've used the rankings in the past, is that they kind of guide the conversation, but we have never, in my experience at least, just said, okay, let's do the top 5 and that finishes the conversation. It's a helpful way to see kind of where everybody else is thinking and to maybe narrow things down in the way that we were just able to, but we have not used it as kind of a hard and fast
Gotcha.
way of making the decisions. And then I'll also just say, because we sort of discuss this a little bit every time and then always end up with the same result, but we have Andrew here, so we'll have the conversation again, which is that although we are allowed to give to select 5 organizations, we don't have to, and there are some towns that also select 1. We have always selected 5 in my experience, but that we could select anywhere between 1 and 5. As like we heard Lev making the recommendation, right, that we fund the survival center in total, and if we did that, we maybe would decide not to fund 4 others because it would be such a small amount. But that's entirely, one of the things that we have to discuss. And usually what we've done is to choose the 5 and then figure out how to do the money. But that's also not how we have to do it. So why don't we sort of start, I guess, with really selecting the organizations, and if we then, as we start talking about money, if we decide that we want to rethink those, we can. Nothing's set in stone until we're done. So the survival center, we have. I know I keep saying in my experience, but we have always funded it in the past, and I think we're always recognizing the incredible work that they do, and that every year it becomes more and more essential in town to have a place like the survival center. And I would certainly recommend that it be one of our 5 organizations.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about that. I mean, they do incredible work, and if we think about the impact and the number of people affected, and just what Lev brought up now is really kind of sitting with me, that I would recommend we fund their request in full and then determine the other 3 or 4. It's a big chunk of the total. I understand that. It's more than what we funded last year, but looking at the impact between their work and the other requests, you can't compete with 4,000. So that's just that's my thought, as a starting point.
I think I say this every year when I think about impact, there's sort of, to me, sort of two ways to think about it. And one of the ways is how many people are being impacted. And then the other is the impact on the particular person, right? So if we think about family outreach, for example, assisting somebody in not losing their home, that's an enormous impact for that one person, and maybe beyond even a bigger impact than getting him 2 weeks of meals.
Right.
But it's a much smaller number of people who are getting that impact. So it's always, I've always had sort of struggling with the impact, because
Yeah.
I mean, as we say every year, every one of these organizations does incredible work, and
Incredible
it's
work.
heartbreaking that we have to be choosing and that they should even need funding, right? They should be,
Right.
well, ideally they wouldn't even need to exist, but we're not there. So, but that we have to sort of select from among them is, it really is just something to grapple with every year.
I would agree, and I would actually go maybe even a bit further to say that I think what the Survival Center is doing is so important and meeting the needs of so many people, in terms of food security, the program that we're funding. I would be hesitant to add the mobile market as one of our funders, because as I think that's awesome that the fresh food right from the farms are being made available. In some ways, that overlaps with the food pantry program that actually does go out into the community too. So I would favor any money that would otherwise not be available for food security kind of all go in that survival center basket. So I would advocate not including the mobile market this year.
Okay.
Can I just get clarification? The amount we have available is 170,000, is that correct? And last year we had 185,000?
Yep.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
was reading that right.
Yeah. No, and the year before that, it was a 2-year grant, I think, right? And so it was double.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to go off track there. I just
No,
wanted
no,
to-
that's
Mm.
does anybody else have thoughts about the Amherst mobile market? I mean, other than recognizing it's an awesome organization that does such great work, and I was so happy we were able to fund it last year. I think in a really important year of its existence to really help it get to where it's at now in terms of its impact.
I think the thinking makes sense that if we did give the survival center all that they asked, that we could then think about not funding the mobile market this year and just funneling all that food security effort into one place. I think that would make sense, though. Yeah, it would be hard because I've seen the mobile market,
Yeah.
all throughout the summer doing what they do, and it's great.
Okay, well, why don't we sort of move from the food security and then have a conversation now about maybe the housing organization. So that would be Family Outreach and the Amherst Community Connections. I think those two are the two that really fall into that category. And not that we have to pick, one from every category, but just sort of thinking about those two together if we were to fund just one or both, or we'll just discuss them. So Family Outreach is asking for 50,000, and the Community Connections is asking for 40. I know Amherst Community Connections does really incredible work. I was a little all over the place with their application and trying to figure out exactly what it was that we would be funding, that the CDBG would be funding. And so I don't know if other people had different feelings. It just felt like there were so many different numbers.
Yeah, it was not clear to me how the $40,000 was to be used or the cost per participant. I couldn't really suss that out. So I mean, if we had to choose between the two, Family Outreach of Amherst also had, they said 355 interventions. It was much clearer to follow. They're both doing amazing work. I don't want to say that they're not. But I think in terms of clarity and need, it was clearer from Family Outreach's application.
Yeah, I agree. The community connections applications are never, to me, as clear as they could be. But we have funded them in the past, and I think they do good work. And it's a little bit of a different need, maybe. I mean, the family outreach kind of avoiding evictions and keeping people in their homes and providing that sort of help versus community connections is more kind of getting people into housing where they haven't had it before. So it's kind of serving a different core need for different parts of the community. So I wouldn't mind funding both if we have funds available. That kind of housing does seem to be a very, very core need that many parts of our community have. But funds are limited, so I mean that's the.
I mean, one of the nice things about being able to fund the VFW project, and also even the land trust, is that it does feel like we're putting money. We have the opportunity to put money toward housing as a need, right? In the past, so often the non-social service money is going to something, a great project, but not something that's kind of addressing the kinds of things that the social service organizations are working on. So I was glad that we were able to take some of what seems like such a bigger, chunk of money and put it towards something that feels more social servicey. So Andrew, any thoughts on those two organizations?
So I rated both of them the same way. I think I had questions for both of them, but I can see the need. I also feel that they're serving the same number of participants, pretty much. We're looking at, I think, 350 families, people. Units, I don't remember, how it is, versus 320. So, and similar amounts. So I'm more leaning, for clarity reasons towards Family Outreach of Amherst.
Yeah, I felt the same.
Okay,
And for the same reasons, the clarity. Yeah. It was easier to get right away. It was.
But are we talking for the whole amount? Because I think if we fund the Amherst Survival Center 83, that leaves us about $86,000, 86,500, so that's going to be a big chunk of our, so how do
I feel like we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
I'm sort of, my goal right now is to winnow down the number of organizations, and then we'll tackle the financial piece. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's certainly something to think about. So why don't we talk about the literacy project? I'm just sort of looking at my list here, which is asking for 20,000 and was fairly low on the rankings list. And well, let's take other people. I don't have to give you my thoughts first. Other people can go first.
I can share some thoughts, if you, traditionally we have not funded them, or at least, I've been here, this is my second year, so I cannot cannot claim traditionally. We didn't fund them last year, but I think, their level of, the criteria that we use to decide, which is the greatest impact in the community, would always be a disadvantage to them, because they are serving a smaller number, of individuals, However, I cannot help but think, that their work is very important. And I know I advocated for them last year. I think we're underestimating the impact of self-sufficiency, creating, a level of self-sufficiency, educating. And so I think those are lifelong tools. And I think that, at some point we should seriously consider, the impact that their work can have in our community. So that's my thought. I think they're doing wonderful work. I think their proposal is good. And they're asking for a small, amount of money, that can have a tremendous impact in their organization and in our community.
Mm-hmm. Anyone have any other thoughts on the literacy project?
I guess my thoughts on that project, and it may have been the same last year, was just that, just over 50% of their work is in Amherst. And the rest is in, Franklin and I think they said Hampshire County too. So is outside of Amherst. So that kind of weighs into how I ranked their application.
Yeah. And I thought about that, Suzanne, as well, but I think, that the clientele, that they are serving, sometimes, does move around, and, eventually we will get the impact. But I do hear, the logic very, yeah.
I mean, they likely cannot afford to live in Amherst, for some of the population that they're serving, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I always think about the impact for them as well, Zoe, as you had mentioned, and I was just looking at my notes, and I think they had identified that there would be 16 people that they could work with, which really does feel like such a small number. I think those 16 would be greatly impacted, kind of to go back to my point before, right? Like what they are coming out with is huge, but it is such a small number of people.
Yeah.
And although it's similar to what the Center for New Americans does, like CNA has, an actual physical space where people go, and it seems like there are more people that it's able to serve. So between the two of those, it seems like there's more kind of bang for the buck that we get in funding CNA.
Yeah, which I think is the decision we made last year as well, when we were sort of choosing between the two. All right, Big Brothers Big Sisters. Every year that I've been on this committee, we've funded Big Brothers Big Sisters, and it's always interesting. They're really the only organization that occupies that space of youth development.
Yeah, and they do a great job. I'm glad we've been able to fund them every year. Maybe not as much as they asked. And one thing I did notice, I believe last year they asked for 40,000, and we funded 33,000 some. And this year they only asked for 35,000.
Yeah.
But they're still doing the same work, really.
Yeah. Somebody had asked a question about whether they were going to interact differently, I think, with the schools. And I wondered, and the question implied that there's something different, something happening with that program at the schools. What is happening? Does anybody know?
So I don't know the details, but I'd read in the paper, I guess, that one of the things that the superintendent is doing is reorganizing some of how that's done, whether it's not as much at the central office level and more dispersed to the schools and so forth. So I didn't know all the details and how far along that process was, but I thought I would ask the question. And they seem to be aware of it, and it didn't seem to be a concern for their sort of pipeline of potential kids to help.
Yeah. All right, I think we have gone through all of them.
Oh yeah, we talked about Center for New Americans, right? Yeah.
I mean, we talked about Center for New Americans more sort of in relation to
To
literacy
the
project. Do
literacy.
other people have thoughts on? I mean, I think, you know, it would be, obviously there's so much impact in the immigrant community right now, on what's happening at the federal level. And so it, seems, like the work that they're doing is, you know, I mean, more and more probably life-saving,
Mhm.
life-changing, but life-saving in a lot of ways. When I think about, you know, the work that they do. So I'd like to see us be able to fund them this year. And they're asking for such a small amount.
Mhm.
How much, I don't have in front of me what we funded them last year.
20,000.
20 last year? Okay.
20,000, yeah.
Last year we funded 16,748 of their request. I don't remember
Okay.
what they requested, but that's what we,
Okay. Right, because I think we did about 80% for most
I
organizations
think
last
that's
year.
how we, yeah.
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 Okay.
Right.
All right. So I'm just sort of making a list of places we had many, like the particularly positive things to say. And it looks like we're at, where people have made comments about wanting to fund, Survival Center, Center for New Americans, Big Brothers Big Sisters, family outreach. Although that was more a conversation about funding them over ACC if we were choosing a housing place, not necessarily definitively funding them. And it sounds like I guess one thing I'll say about Amherst Mobile Market, which I really, and I think I agree with the decision to, if we're picking for a food security category, to go with Survival Center in full. But one of the things that really strikes me about the Amherst Mobile Market is that they do come in under the food security category, but they also do, you know, professional development, and they do, I mean, people work there, and it sort of has that community base to it that I think is so important. And that I just think it's such a wonderful organization. So I always hate not funding them. But I see where we're at.
One thought I had is if we kind of level funded everyone that we've talked about from, not smiling, it's probably thinking the same thought maybe, from what we did last year, and then the leftover of that to the survival center, and not do the full survival center amount might be one way to do it, because if we level funded everybody, it's still below what everybody asked for. But it at least would approve, we could fund five proposals. It's hard with being $15,000 shorter.
Wait.
I'm only coming up with 4 organizations on my
Oh, so
list.
you're
that I
saying
just-
not Amherst Mobile Market?
Correct. I said, what I
Oh,
was saying, I
okay.
understand why we wouldn't, I mean,
Then it would
I,
just be 4.
yeah.
But
Wait,
even
so-
if we level funded Big Brothers, Family Outreach, and Center for New Americans, we couldn't fully fund Amherst Survival Center.
Mhm.
Right, but it's only about $5,000.
5,000, yeah.
over, right?
And it would be more than they got last year, Amherst
Right.
Survival Center.
But it's still, yeah, it'd be not too much less than
The request.
right.
Right. Is there any, I mean, sometimes I think, you know, it's hard not to have a bias toward organizations that we've funded before, because we know them and we've seen them do good work and we know them well. And so I try to not have that in thinking about this. And I think Amherst Mobile Market, you know, the first time we ever funded it was last year. We didn't fund it the first year. Is there a concern anybody has, or is it, I don't, even something that we should be considering, that if we don't fund them, that they will not be able to do their work?
That's a really good question.
Well, I guess my thought there is that we kind of help them get started, and if there's enough kind of community interest in supporting them, then this is, you know, time for them to try to make that work.
I mean, their budget is both CDBG and non-CDBG funded. Um,
I mean, I guess one thought I'm having is thinking that we, as I said before, we're able to fund projects that are about housing and homelessness with the non-service. And I know that doesn't do anything specifically for family outreach. But the idea that there is a lot of money going toward housing issues, and that maybe bringing in Amherst Mobile Market into the 5 and giving them some of what we would be giving, some of, sort of dividing that pot, some, I don't know, giving family outreach like 30 and Amherst Mobile Market 20. Or some version of that. That just sort of spreads the money around a little bit more.
yeah, we could take a portion of the Amherst Mobile Market. So part of what they're budgeting for CDBG funds is no cost shares for produce purchases, $20 a family, 77 families. So we could come up with a calculation using $20 as a starting point to at least be able to do some of that, of the shares for their market.
So Susanna, I'm sorry, say that, I'm trying to pull up their budget. So
I'm
yours,
just
so,
looking at their budget, page 7. So they have a column for CDBG and then non-CDBG. Under CDBG, they have produce purchases, no cost shares, 77 families, $20 times 20 weeks. So if we wanted to take a portion, you know, thinking about a portion of their budget to go towards, you know, purchasing food for them to provide at the market,
right.
you could take a percentage of that.
Now I got it up.
So just looking at some numbers here, if we gave 90% of last year's allocation, so basically 10% less to Big Brothers, Center for New Americans, and Family Outreach. So they got 90% of what they got last year. And use that for mobile market, that would be 9,174.
And that would have Survival Center still getting about 78.
Yes, 78, yeah.
So I'm sorry, Nat. So you're saying to take what each organization got in 24 and calculate 90% of that?
Not, yeah, so,
Yeah.
right, so, Big Brothers, Center for New Americans and
Yeah.
Family Outreach would get 10% less
Yeah.
than last year.
Got it.
Survival Center would get more than last year. They would get 78 plus a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we'd have a little more than 9,000 for mobile market to
Mobile market. Okay.
support them and supplement other fundraising that they're able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like the idea of doing that. I think it's an important organization in as I said, in those two different ways, and that even if we're not giving them even close to really what they're asking for, it's sort of a showing a sign of support, and providing something, right? And recognizing what the Survival Center is doing in the same categories, they're doing it all year long and with, a much bigger impact. But I think the Amherst Mobile Market has those two categories that it's really making a difference in. And is such like an outgrowth of the community, it was so community created and based.
Right.
And I just think that that's exactly what these kinds of, what community development block grants should be doing, is helping to develop that kind of community organization. And obviously, ideally, one day it could stand on its own, but it's not there yet. So I think giving something to it is important if we can figure out how to do that. So I really like the idea of doing it that way, that you just described, Nat, being able to give them something.
Well, even though we don't necessarily try to allocate to the top scorers, that actually would end up being the top scorers that we're funding,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
as a
Right,
result.
you're not going to ignore the rubric.
It's not a goal necessarily that we have to do that,
Right. Right.
but it does mean that hopefully, if people are applying, they should know that a good application is really important in the in this process.
Right. So what would those, do you have those dollar amounts so we could talk about
Yeah,
voting
I'm
on
curious
them?
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So 70,
yeah. So mobile. Okay. Let's start with survival. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So this is basically the way this is calculated is the money that we had last year for Big Brothers, Center for New Americans, and Family Outreach. If we kept that the same, then Survival Center would get 78,256. So we'll start there with the Survival Center at 78,256.
Mhm.
Then we take Family Outreach, Center for New Americans, and Big Brothers, and allocate 90% of what they had last year. So Family Outreach, that would be 37,483. CNA would be 15,073. Big Brothers, 30,013. So that would leave left over for Amherst Mobile Market, 9,174.
How much is for Center for New Americans?
15073.
Oh, 15,
Yeah.
okay, I thought you said 50, sorry.
Yeah, 15073. Yep. So that means if you're keeping score, in terms of the percentage of what they're asking for this year, that would mean Amherst Survival Center would be 94%. Big Brothers Big Sisters would be at 86% of what they asked for this year, partly because they reduced their overall request, but they're doing the same work. both Center for New Americans and Family Outreach would get 75% of what they asked for.
Yeah.
And Mobile Market would end up at 19%.
And last year, am I remembering, I don't know if anybody remembers it, we did about 80% of what everybody asked for across
That
the
was about
board?
83%.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think we did an even allocation. Or
okay. So it's the same, I know every dollar counts, but it's sort of in the same ballpark in terms of percentages of what they're getting of the requests. Thank you for doing all the math, Nat. So does anybody want to make a motion or have more of a discussion about this, or throw out any other ideas? Or decide that, or I mean, obviously, like just because I'm a big Amherst Mobile Market proponent doesn't mean.
No, you're not. I think it serves a great need in the community, and I think traditionally Amherst is a food desert. There's not a lot of points that people cannot drive, let alone have access to fresh food. So there is still a need for it's unfortunate that we don't have more funds to really, but any level of funding really helps them. It could be as you said, sustaining them for a lengthier period of time so they can do more um, grant writing or development. I think there is a need, so I'm loving I am really liking the idea of funding them at the level that we just suggested.
Great. All right. Anyone else want to offer any thoughts or make a motion? I guess I should also just say, ask Walker and Nate whether there's anything you think we should, as you hear us to having this conversation, is there anything in your minds that we should know? Or any thoughts you want to share before we vote?
Did we miss anything?
Yeah.
Not super experienced, but it seemed like pretty comprehensive, and I think you made good recommendations. So I wouldn't have done it differently myself.
We know Nate will speak if he has anything to say, and he's not, so we'll just assume doesn't happen. We're not
Yeah,
heading
yeah.
down a bad road. Okay, good.
No, all good. I don't have anything.
Okay.
I think yeah, I think that's good. I was gonna say next on the agenda would be we have a scheduled public hearing in mid-March, which is required. And so before that, we talk to the town manager about the discussion and recommendations from tonight, and then the public hearing is a chance for the agencies and the public to ask questions and comments about the recommended activities that would be in the grant application. And then the application itself is due April 15th to the state. So then Walker and I would, work on getting that submitted online by the deadline.
Okay. So if what we've just discussed is the proposal that we put forward, then that goes to the town manager between now and the hearing? Or
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't? Okay. And he'll register any concerns he might have that we would then be able to address.
Sure. Yeah.
At the public
Yeah,
hearing.
we develop a memo, staff writes a memo to the town manager with the recommendations. And then that's also made into the public hearing notice and provided online for everyone to see what the recommended activities were and the funding amounts.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, well, I will move then that we fund in the way that that Nat outlined, with the Amherst Survival Center getting 94% of its request at 78,256. Big Brothers Big Sisters getting 86% of its request at $30,013. Family Outreach 75% of its request at 37,483. Center for New Americans getting 75% of its request at $15,073, and Amherst Mobile Market getting 19% of its request at $9,174. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Zoe?
I do, in favor.
Okay. Matt?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then unanimously have made that decision. Great. Do we have our next meeting scheduled? I'm sure we do. For our public, I'm sure we do, right, in March?
I think we did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, March 13th.
Okay. Oh, that's right. It's on a Thursday. Okay. Okay. Terrific. And so, if there's anything that comes up from the town manager or other issues that come up, then Walker, you'll just let us know before then. And otherwise, then what we'll be prepared to do on the 13th is hear from any members of the public who want to address the decisions that we've made. And I guess we can alter our decisions if we want to at that time, if there's new information that comes. But generally, I think it's more just about listening to people's responses. Okay. Does anybody have anything else that didn't come up? Oh, and Lev is asking to confirm the March date. So did you, March 13th? Any topics that we didn't anticipate? Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, great. Thanks, everybody. That was a really efficient meeting. I'm still just really surprised that nobody else came. It's strange, and I keep waiting to find out there was some technical glitch, but since Lev is here, we know it's possible to get in. We'll probably maybe hear from more people at the next meeting. All right. Thanks, everybody,
Great.
for all your hard
Thanks.
work.
So
All
much.
right.
Night.
See you later.
Have a good night.
Right.
Bye.